What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are playing catch up with the time that I was off from having the flu. And we're here with Superman, who basically starts losing control. And it's amazing. So, what this does here is this picks up off the last video that we did, right? Essentially, the return of Doomsday in DC Comics. But he's not really Doomsday as we know him. He is, but he isn't. But here's one of the really cool things that I want to talk about for a second, because I kind of want to go into this discussion about Superman 1 million. And you guys will see what I'm talking about here in a moment. But as a quick little bit of a recap, and in fact, one of the things that happens here in the opening of the story is that Williamson kind of takes us through the history of Doomsday to a degree. Now, he doesn't go like super in depth. It's a page and a half, maybe 2 pages. But it kind of makes perfect sense, because I think that for the average comic book fan out there, the average comic enjoyer, who may not be overly well versed in Doomsday, they know enough to know that like him and Superman essentially killed each other in a fight, and that Doomsday can basically come back from whatever kills him. And that's largely it, right? A lot of people don't really know the ins and outs of Doomsday. And truth to tell, if you understand that, you understand enough. Not a whole lot of meat and potatoes to Doomsday's character. But what you're seeing here with him basically becoming the time trapper, this version of himself that survives until the end of all things, kind of makes perfect sense. That if you're Doomsday and every time you die, you come back immune from whatever it was that killed you, then you would logically live until the end of everything. And because Doomsday always evolves, eventually he would move to a place where he evolves into like a sentient, intelligent being as you see him here. And so that's why when you get this little bit of a history, it's like, I was created by my original being that called me the ultimate, right? This being that was like supposed to be able to withstand and survive anything. And that he literally just kind of like went out into the universe, right? Raising world after world until he was ultimately defeated and then inadvertently sent to Earth, or really intentionally sent to Earth, and then ultimately woke up, right? Like emerged and then just started taking out all these members of the Justice League of America, including Bloodwind, who I have no idea whatever happened to him. And honestly, I don't really care. I was just kind of curious. But he also kind of gives us this little bit of like a flash forward, right? Where Doomsday says that over time, stretching all the way until the ending of all things, he and Superman will fight. They're basically destined to live until the universe dies, and that they will always fight, or seem to always fight, as the universe went on. Now, here's where you go into the idea of Superman 1 million, right? Because it's a thing that's very easy to overlook, but in the bottom, like right-hand corner of this page, right, where you get the credits and all that kind of stuff, that's a golden Superman, and that looks like Superman 1 million. Now, for those of you guys who don't know who that is, and it's not overly important to the story, but it is like the most powerful Superman in existence, there was a story that was written by, I think it was Grant Morrison, I'm not going to swear to it, but it was DC 1 million. And the idea was that it kind of established that like in the 853rd century, right, eons from now, the Justice League is alive and well, and that Superman has essentially had offspring, and those offspring have kind of continued on as time went, and that the Justice League as we know it had kind of grown and expanded and encompassed like multiple worlds, and it was really, really cool. It was a potential future in the DC landscape, but it was really fascinating. During that time, the main Superman, which is to say the one that you and I have always read and died at the hands of Doomsday and so on, that there came a point when he essentially spent like 15,000 years in the sun or something like that, absorbing all the sun's solar energy. And when he came out, he was cracked. Superman 1 million was nuts. And I say that really more as conjecture, because I don't think that we got like any crazy displays of like Superman 1 million's powers, but like Superman, who basically thrives on solar energy, absorbing it for 15,000 years, you can only imagine. But kind of getting back into the main story itself, right? I just thought it was kind of cool that DC really seems to indicate that like Superman will become Superman 1 million at some point. So that possible future is seemingly the guaranteed future of the DC landscape. We just have to wait until the 853rd century to get there. But the thing is, like when you get back into the main story itself, that Doomsday kind of warns him of this, right? Now, Doomsday, of course, at this point is the time trapper. And if you didn't see our last video, you don't necessarily know what it meant. It's not a great big huge deal. Contextually, you'll figure it out. But in essence, Doomsday has the ability to like travel back and forth through time. And that's where Superman asks the question, like, you have all of your history at your disposal. Why are you here? right? Why are you here in this moment? And what Doomsday essentially tells him is that because he'll always come back from whatever killed him, this is like the quote unquote second to final form, right? His penultimate form. If he dies now, he will come back as a true god and literally rule over the entirety of the universe in DC. Now, one of the things to know here is that the term God in DC Comics is very different from what it means in Marvel Comics. And those of you guys who are familiar with DC, bear with me here for a second for the people who are not. In DC Comics, for those of you guys who are unfamiliar, you really do have like the presence, and you've got Lucifer Morningstar, and you have a lot of the Judeo-Christianity that while it is technically on that other side of DC Comics, it is part and parcel to what you see here, right? At the time that Doomsday and Superman are having this discussion, Lucifer's out doing something, I don't know, like in the bar, hitting on that one cop, and we all kind of hope they get together, even though we know they won't. And it's one of the biggest travesties of the show, they never actually did. But the thing is that the term God, as Doomsday is using it, isn't really like, I will become the new presence, right? I'll become as powerful as Lucifer Morningstar. It's really more of like a almost kind of symbolic ideology, right? This almost sort of a metaphorical thing, right? Like, I will become incredibly powerful, and I will become a god relative to like what the average person can do, right? Like more or less like you, but just a little more powerful. And so at the end of the day, while Superman's just kind of like, I don't know how I feel about helping my mortal enemy attain some level of godhood, I'm a little uncertain about all of that, Doomsday drops a couple clues. One of the things he says, for example, is that General Zod is going to come back, and General Zod is going to take Superman's right eye when that happens. Now, I am excited to see that story, not gonna lie. Joshua Williamson, make it happen, bro. But one of the other things that Doomsday does is he gives him a kind of prophecy. And he's like, I've come here because there is a terror and a horror that is coming your way. Right? It's only a matter of time before it gets here. The lives that are going to be lost will be unlike anything that you've experienced before. Now, this is Joshua Williamson also kind of playing a little fast and loose, and truth to tell, I kind of hope it's just a Superman-centric story. I hope it's not some giant crossover, because truth to tell, man, I'm kind of tired of crossover events, dude. I just want to read like 12 issues of things popping off in a Superman comic, and that's it. It's just Superman. And like no one else, right? Like just no one else is involved. I'm kind of excited about that happening. But, one of the things that Doomsday says is you will survive as you always do. The rest of your allies are not so lucky. Now, Superman takes this as a kind of personal threat, but it's one of the things that Doomsday kind of says is like, look, yes, I'm talking about myself, but also not myself, right? That was me. Like, I'm from the future. So the version of Doomsday that's here right now at the time they're telling that story, when time travel, because remember, all of this is taking place with time frozen, right? Like the time trapper stopped time in the last video. So nothing's happening at the time that Superman and he are having this conversation. Everything's frozen in time. And so he's like, yes, like that version of Doomsday down there is me, an old version of me, but no, like I'm just the catalyst, right? Like that Doomsday is a catalyst for what comes next. It's not really Doomsday per se that is the actual threat. Now, maybe he's lying, maybe he's not, only time will tell as far as the comic unfolds. But because Superman takes it as a personal threat, he actually goes to attack Doomsday, and Doomsday stops him dead in his tracks, literally grabbing him and just starts choking him out. Now, this is really, really cool because again, this Doomsday's from the future, which means he's far stronger than the version of Doomsday that's just running around down there on the ground and doing some crazy stuff. And so that's why he tells him, like, look, like I may be from the future, I may have evolved, but I am not above physical violence, and just grabs Superman and just throws him down into the ground. And then just says, when we meet again, you will choose to help me, or you will watch everyone you love perish. To show you that a better future involves us working together, I offer you a head start on your coming battle against my past self. Remember, time is of the essence. And he disappears and time goes back, right? Like things just go right back to where they were before, where Lois Lane is doing what she can to fight off Doomsday. Now, again, we covered that in the last video that we did. Not overly complicated. The long and short of this, is that Lois Lane now has the powers of Superman, right? It's not going to be a long-lasting thing. It's only going to be momentary. DC does this, right? Like every, couple decades or so, they'll just like throw in a story where Lois Lane gets the powers of Superman for a little while, and then she loses them, and like that's it. It's always a fun little treat. I always love seeing it happen. But Superman realizing that in this conflict, in this battle, Lois does not have the ability to overcome Doomsday. I mean, I guess technically she does, but she lacks experience because fighting Doomsday is not just brute force. Superman learned that lesson when Doomsday killed him in the Death of Superman story. You can't just go into this battle just punching your way through it. You have to have finesse. You have to know how to move. You have to basically outsmart Doomsday. Lois doesn't have that because she doesn't have the experience. Superman knows she will die. What does he do? Son. Superman races around the world, literally just like beelines across the world as fast as he can. Dare I say, man, this dude almost looks like he's invoking Wally West's infinite mass punch because this guy comes in, guns blazing, and just clocks Doomsday as hard as he possibly can. And it's nuts because there's this point where like it shakes the city. Like this hit is so hard, it shakes the city. It almost reminds me of Justice League Unlimited, right? That show that was nowhere near as good as the original. When Superman goes to like punch Darkseid and it's like, I can finally cut loose. And like the final episode of the show, it was amazing. Like, it was absolutely awesome. And yes, it was not as good as the original. That's because I grew up with the original. God, I know I'm going to piss people off. And observing all of this, Superman realizes that Doomsday is immersed in hellfire. It's not just traditional flames. Now, we know that because Doomsday escaped from hell. Again, we'll probably make a little playlist just for this, or at least maybe include it in the Superman playlist, so you can read the story where Doomsday was sent to hell, and then basically kind of the lead up to him escaping, and then this. So maybe like 3 or 4 videos. I don't know. We'll kind of see how we feel about it. Either way, it'll be linked at the end of the video. But Superman didn't necessarily notice this. And even Lois asked the question, right? Was that punch enough to take out Doomsday? And Superman's like, no. It was enough to incapacitate him, right? It was enough to like momentarily knock him down. But like, no, it was definitely not enough to destroy Doomsday. And so while Doomsday is also accompanied by literally Doomhounds, yes, Doomsday has dogs, and it is amazing. It is awesome. But Doomsday has dogs. Lois deals with those, right? And then like Superman himself focuses directly on Doomsday. And so what ends up happening is that while this whole fight is going on, Superman makes contact with Mercy, who was at one point the ally of Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor doesn't have his memories, right? If you guys aren't familiar with that, we'll throw it in the playlist as well. But in effect, it's the Superman family, right? Like his allies. So kind of like his version of Oracle, Barbara Gordon, who helps out Batman. It's essentially that. And what Mercy's been doing is working on a kind of backup plan in case something like this happens. Because truth to tell, Superman being killed by Doomsday was no small thing. And so there were always these kind of like backup plans, right? Because there was always the question, what if Doomsday comes back? It's only a matter of time before he does. It'd be foolish to believe he would never return for one reason or another. So we need to be prepared. Now again, because Doomsday can never truly be killed, no matter what plan you develop outside of some godly powerful being who can just wave their hand and he just ceases to exist, every plan you make is going to be a stopgap. It's going to be putting bubble gum on a leaking wall. Some water is going to come from somewhere else. There's no way to really end the threat of Doomsday permanently. And so initially Batman and the Justice League chime in, and this is, I love that Joshua Williamson did this, right? He's like, he has Mercy literally say, no, you're the backup plan in case things go south with Superman. Let Superman handle this. I love that Williamson did that because I don't believe that the Justice League needs to show up for everything. More so than that, it gives the story greater stakes because for Superman, the fight's personal. For Lois, it's personal too because Doomsday killed her husband at one point, but Superman understands the gravity of what would happen if he loses here. And so a kind of personal battle is significant. What Mercy ends up doing is she brings in the initial contingency plan where she asks, did you eat today, big guy? And this dude says, had breakfast but skipped lunch because work got busy. You know how it is. And Mercy's like, good. And those of you guys who are familiar with the Superman mythos, you probably know who this is. But then like you get to the next page, They're literally dispatching Parasite. Now, those of you guys who are not familiar with Parasite, there have been different versions of the character. The only one anybody actually cares about is Rudy Jones. Let's be honest here, guys. Nobody cares about any other version of Parasite besides Rudy. And probably because of Superman the Animated Series, if we're being honest. But Parasite's a really, really cool character. The long and short of Parasite is historically he kind of became a villain, right? Due to his whole, experiment and so on that basically turned him into this being that has to absorb energy to survive. Now, he can absorb almost any and all forms of energy. But if we're talking about like the energy that's like, I've been smoking a blunt, I've got the munchies, and, the White Castle craving is kicking in. For Rudy, that's life energy, right? Like that's like the greatest form of energy that he can eat. And it just tastes amazing to him. The issue with this is that, and I wouldn't really say it's an issue, but more recently in DC Comics, Rudy actually kind of reformed. And it's one of the things that I love that they did with this character. And I love that DC's kind of been doing that on again and off again with different characters over time, right? Clayface, for example, joining the Batman family, and the most tragic turn of events where we knew he was either going to have to become a bad guy, once again, or he was going to die, which was sad, but beautiful at the same time. That with Rudy, he joined Supercorps, right? The Superman team. Now, of course, they gave him a kind of wristband that basically allowed him to kind of stay sustained with energy. And it wasn't one of those things where it's like, we're going to give you just enough, No, it basically kept him satisfied pretty much for the most part. But when he's dropped in here and he starts feeding on the energy of Doomsday, he's just like, dude, this guy's power, his life energy, it's infinite. This guy will live forever, man. It's a bottomless buffet, right? It's an unlimited feast. This guy is literally Shrimp Fest from Red Lobster, right? Unlimited shrimp, any way you want it, and Cheddar Bay biscuits. But here's the issue with this, right? In all seriousness, what Superman tells him is you can't go on forever. Yes, you can absorb his energy, and the more energy you absorb, the weaker he will become. But if you absorb all his energy as life force, and then you kill him, he will come back immune to your power. We do not want that. We want to push him to the edge, but we don't want him to die. It's almost a kind of torture if we're being a little honest with ourselves. But like Superman tells him, like, you have to stop. And Rudy almost can't help himself. And that's where Doomsday grabs Rudy and tears him in half. Dude, he rips this guy's body in half, kills Parasite on the spot. And they're just kind of like, what is going on? And it's like one of the greatest like splash pages I think I've ever seen. Like literally Doomsday's ripping Rudy in half, and then like Superman's just sort of like, oh my God. And then Doomsday just like roars at everybody, and it's just amazing. Because at that point, Superman loses it. And this is when he starts to lose control, right? This is when all that basically starts to go out the window, because Superman starts lashing out and fighting very much the same way he did in the Death of Superman to a degree, where he almost kind of falls into like this, I don't know if I would call it a berserker rage, but where he literally just starts pummeling, right? With just extreme anger and rage over everything that Doomsday has done. Lois sees that and she thinks her husband is about to die again. But Superman starts losing control and literally pummels Doomsday to the point where he almost dies. But he's like crackling with all this energy in a form that we haven't really even seen before, right? Pure unadulterated rage. And I'm kind of curious to see where this leads, because if I'm honest with you guys, man, how dope would it be if like there is some kind of conflict in the Superman comics, things go sideways, Superman just is filled with rage, and then like a Red Lantern ring appears out of nowhere, and it's like, Superman, you have great rage in your heart, you belong to the Red Lanterns. How amazing would that be? A Red Lantern Superman? My God, dude, it would be one of the coolest things ever in the history of DC Comics. Joshua Williamson, I really hope you're going that direction, man. I really, really do. But at the end of the day, right, because Doomsday has just been pummeled so badly, and because Parasite was able to siphon off enough energy to weaken Doomsday, even if not kill him, it does allow for some kind of tranquilizers to be used on Doomsday. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys are just like, what? Tranquilizers? No. I mean, for real and for true, right? They are used. But of course, there is acknowledgement here that, like, of course you're not going to be able to take out Doomsday with some tranquilizers for elephants. And so what they end up doing is actually injecting him with a kind of serum that's derived from the Black Mercy plants. Now, the Black Mercy plants are cool. You don't see them too often in DC Comics, but when a Black Mercy plant is attached to you, you actually almost kind of go into this dream state where in the real world, you almost look catatonic, but like in your mind, you're constantly experiencing these dreams. Now, they also know it's only a stopgap. Again, there is no foolproof way to stop Doomsday. And so while they know that eventually he'll break out of this dream state and he'll reemerge, in the interim, they're trying to find a way to essentially, hold him captive for some measure of time. And so what you end up doing here, and I can't believe Williamson did this. My mind is kind of blown about this. You switch over to Calaton. Now, if my memory serves me, and I'm not going to swear by this, so if you are more familiar with it, make sure you post down in the comments. I'm sure you guys will. Rob is wrong. Got to post a comment, right? But if I'm wrong, post a comment. As far as I remember, Calaton was home to Radiant. Now, for those of you guys who don't know who Radiant was dope. The idea was like when Doomsday was going on a warpath, Radiant was this being that was kind of created almost in the same way that Doomsday was, but he was composed of pure energy. Radiant did initially defeat Doomsday, and then Doomsday came back and killed Radiant. I don't remember if he absorbed his energy or what, but like tore this guy apart, and that was the end of him. Now, I don't know if they're bringing him back. This guy puts on a mask, and he very much looks like the mask that Doomsday wore at the very beginning of the Death of Superman storyline. That matters because that's the suit that was put on Doomsday as part of the burial tradition of Calaton prior to the Death of Superman story, when he was like jettisoned from Calaton when it was believed that Doomsday had been killed. So again, like it's really cool. And I'm really hoping Radiant does show up here, right? But only time will tell once we get to the next issue next month. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. This story is phenomenal. I have not been this excited for Superman since I would say like the Dan Jurgens and Frank Thierry run from DC Rebirth. But thank you all for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.